Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. In a recent episode, I talked about toxic work environments, specifically how to identify a toxic work environment. Today, I'd like to talk about how to deal with having to work in an environment that is toxic. And this is important because how you deal with it, how you react to it or not react to it can make all the difference. In other words, your own efforts can either help to make or break that experience for you. It makes sense then that it's important to stick to efforts that will make things easier for you, not things that will make your experience worse. When you work in a toxic environment, the first thing that I urge everyone to do is to focus on self-care. Whether or not you realize a toxic work environment is most likely affecting you and not for the better. So it's absolutely up to you. It's your responsibility to take care of yourself. Focus on your health and well-being. You may want to find a support group, even if that's one or two people who can help you to deal with the burdens that come with working in a toxic work environment. Make sure that you find plenty of ways to unwind and to rest. Remember to emphasize your own happiness. Spend time doing things that you like with people whose company you actually enjoy. Part of that self-care can be focusing on a proper work-life balance, whatever that means to you. Everybody's a little bit different when it comes to work-life balance, but make sure that you focus on achieving whatever that balance means to you, whatever the right balance is to you, especially if the workplace environment in which you work is a toxic one. Separate the work domain from the non-work domain. In other words, keep your work separate from your personal life. And do your best not to bring your work home with you. Leave the toxicity and the negativity at work. It doesn't serve you or anyone else at home. Make sure that you don't add to the problem. Don't fuel that fire of the toxic work environment. Some simple examples or simple things to consider are things such as not adding to the drama, not getting engaged in gossip or negativity. Instead, try to focus on what's positive. And this isn't about denying that there's an issue or pretending that there's an issue, but rather channeling your efforts and energy and your attention towards things that truly are positive and not giving your attention and your time and energy to the things that are negative, that fuel the toxicity of the environment. Focus on your purpose, both at work and outside of work. There's nothing like having a purpose to get you through the day and to drive you and move you forward. So think about what your purpose is, whether that's strictly at work or maybe outside of the workplace as well, and let that be the fuel for you throughout the day. When you focus on positive things, when you focus on your purpose, it'll be easier not to give your attention to the negativity that may be around you. So make sure that you are intentional in not paying attention or not giving your focus to the negativity around you. Make sure that you're taking regular breaks throughout your workday. That will allow you to remove yourself from that environment. Because if you get up from your desk, maybe walk out of your office, take a walk outside or around the building, that will allow you to, in some sense, remove yourself from any of that immediate toxicity that may be in your work environment. Try to look for the light side or find humor in the situation. And I know that that particular piece of advice won't be applicable or won't be possible in every environment or in every situation. But if finding humor in what's going on around you is an option, why not give that a try as a way of alleviating the possible effects of a toxic work environment on you? Know who you are. The environment around you is not a reflection of who you are. It was probably toxic long before you joined that organization, and chances are it will remain toxic after you leave. In the same vein, you may have to reclaim your agency. Make sure you take control of your actions and your feelings. Don't let the situation outside of yourself, meaning the environment around you, control you. Seek out positive coworkers. Even if you work in a toxic environment, hopefully you are not the only one in that entire organization that's not contributing to the problem. So seek out people who are not caught up in the toxicity and try to align yourself with them. In the same way, look for people who can help you in the current situation of that toxic environment, whether that's people at the company or someone in your personal life. When facing toxicity at work, you may want to identify a point of conflict and you may want to address it appropriately. Remember that that means being professional and appropriate, non-emotional about it. Addressing problems in a respectful way is much more likely to find a resolution to those problems. And I know that that's not always possible. But if it is possible, you may want to give that a try. As with so many things, you have to pick your battles. This is one of those things. Consider your options. Given that you work in a toxic environment, you have to assess the situation and think about what that environment means to you and for you long term. You may have to consider whether or not you want to stay at that company, and if you decide that you don't want to stay or it's best that you don't stay, work on an exit plan for yourself. In other words, you want to be prepared and you want your move to be well planned and well thought out. In other words, no knee-jerk reactions. It's always best to focus on moves that are advantageous to you. So, if quitting on the spot seems to be the best option, then maybe that's what you have to do sometimes. But more often than not, it's best to take your time and work on an exit plan. So as you consider your future in a company where toxicity is a regular thing, you have to decide whether you want to stay or whether you want to leave. And if you decide to leave, you have to decide whether you make that a quick or immediate exit Or if you make a plan for it, to give notice and make sure that you are taken care of, that your needs are taken care of before you make that move. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. In today's episode, I focused on how to deal with toxic work environments. And one of the biggest recommendations that I always give to people is to focus on self-care. And that can mean different things to different people. But the bottom line is that you have to focus on your health and well-being and make sure that you're okay as you're moving forward to better deal with the toxic environment that's around you. Remember to give some attention to your work-life balance and focus on what is right for you. Don't forget that work and your personal life, your non-work life, are best left separated in most cases for most people. Make sure that you're not fueling the fire and adding to the problem. And rather than getting caught up in the nonsense and negativity, try to focus on those things that are positive in your life and in your work experience. Remember your purpose, whether that's your purpose at work or your purpose outside of work, or maybe both. Remember to take breaks. That gives you an opportunity to remove yourself from the toxic environment. Sometimes you may be able to find the humor in the situation or the lighter side of it. If that's the case, give it a try. It might improve your experience at the workplace. Know who you are and don't let the situation around you change you or dictate how you behave or act. If need be, reclaim your agency and take charge of your own behaviors and reactions. Seek out positive coworkers and align yourself with them, and try to identify those people who can help you with the situation, whether that's people at work or outside of work. You may want to identify a point of conflict for a given situation and address it appropriately. Make sure to be professional and non-emotional about it. Consider your options, whether to stay or not, and if you decide to leave, you may want to have a good, well-thought-out exit plan. The bottom line is to make decisions that will serve you, that will help you. As the week unfolds, I invite you to consider what was presented in this episode. If you are someone who finds themselves working in a toxic environment, remember that there are things that you can do to make the situation better. So why not consider what kinds of things would be helpful in your particular situation and then implement them as part of your best practices, as part of your experience at the workplace. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G. You can find the video version of the podcast on there. In addition to the podcast, you can also find videos that focus on stress management, so I invite you to check it out. The link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.